Hey guys, welcome or welcome back. Tisha here, back for another segment of It's Getting Real. I want to warn you that this one is a tough one. I will be including links in the description that have access to a 427-page document that further details the case, as well as a link to show you some of the images of what happened to this young girl. Let's go ahead and get started on another segment of It's Getting Real. Go ahead and like the video for me. Victoria Ajo Klembe was born on November 2nd, 1991 in the Ivory Coast to her father Francis and her mother Bert. She was the fifth of 7 children, described as beautiful, as you can see via the thumbnail, with a personality that radiated through her smile, loving to sing and dance, as well as helping out her family. She was the ideal child. So a month before her 7th birthday, her great aunt by the name of Marie comes to visit from France for her brother's funeral. She ends up, when you're out to the country or you're with family, you go and visit various family members. She comes by to visit her nephew, which is Victoria's father. And while there, she suggests that she takes one of his 7 kids with her back to France so that they can receive a better education. Now, this meant a lot to her father, Francis, because he was struggling to provide for his children. They were happy, but in the area of Africa where they were at, they were struggling financially. Food was kind of hard to come by sometimes, and education was hard. It was harder to have access to it. So he spoke with his wife and they figured, why not give one of our children the opportunity to excel further? And because of how smart she was and because of what a great child she was, they figured that Victoria would be the best option, because who wouldn't want their child to get an opportunity to further themselves? So despite Victoria not being Marie's first choice, she was chosen to go to France. What happened was originally she was supposed to take another person by the name of Anna, but at the last minute, Anna's parents changed their mind. Good for them. They probably saved their child. Unfortunate for this family here. She had a passport that had Anna's name on it and had Anna listed as her daughter. And the parents were a little reluctant to use that passport because they wanted it to say Victoria's name, but Marie explained to them, like, look, if you guys want to get this done, we have to do this now. It's going to take too long for us to fix this, and I'm going to have to go by then. So the parents question it, but they end up deciding to go through with it. Not only is her name changed, but her appearance is changed as well by adding some extensions to her hair and adjusting her clothing because she has to match the passport photo. So it's time to travel, and apparently the adjustments work. As I said before, the parents thought that Marie was well off, but in reality, she was not. So they arrive in Paris where they have a place, but it is through government assistance. There's nothing wrong with government assistance, but don't act like you're doing so great for yourself when it's not on your own merit, when it's off the backs of others. It's not ideal, but Victoria is still happy because she's able to get an education. At least that's what it seems. She's enrolled in school, but things quickly turn and her attendance at school is lacking. She was absent a lot. She always has various excuses for it, Marie does, but the teachers aren't buying her excuses. At points, she even says that, one of the reasons that she's not there is because she's not, being a good child. But the teachers didn't experience that in their classroom. They experienced a well-rounded child that seemed to be having some difficulties, but it wasn't behavioral. So by December 1998, Marie began to receive warnings about the absences. In February 99, the school issued a child at risk notification and social services then became involved. The school observed how Victoria tended to fall asleep in class. Now, some people may feel like that's not a big deal, but there was something about it that didn't seem right to the teachers. On the last day that Victoria attended the school, on March 25th, 1999, she came to school sporting a new look, which was a shaved head, and she was wearing a wig on top of that. It's sad when you think about it, because the more and more that I talk about the things that happened during this story, you're going to see that this lady really seemed to just want this little girl for the benefits, not because she was really trying to make her life better. So social services, as I said, is made aware of the situation. They finally arrive at the home, but they are too late. And that is because shortly after that, Marie received a call from the teacher wanting to know about why her child's head was shaven, and she used the excuse about her having a scalp condition. They left. Now, there's different reasons why people think that they left. Some feel like it's because of the fact that social services were about to be onto her, and others feel like it was because Marie owed the authorities 2,000 pounds after being paid child benefits that she did not deserve. So on April 24th, 1999, they leave France and they relocate to the United Kingdom, where they settle in Ealing, West London. The first stop was a bed and breakfast. They stayed there for a couple of weeks. Then they stayed at a hostel in Northwest London. On April 25th, 1999, Maria and Victoria then visit Esther, a distant relative of Marie by marriage. She was a midwife, a counselor, and a pastor. Esther, when she met Victoria, described her as bubbly but frail, very small, and smiling. She said that she could tell that the girl's name was not Anna as it was presented to her, but she was still answering to it. And despite seeing how small she was, she didn't think too much of it at first based on her age. She noticed, though, that she was wearing a wig. So she takes it off and she sees a bunch of blisters on the child's head. Marie uses the excuse that she had a hot water incident. So we went from her having a scalp condition and scratching a whole bunch to now her having a hot water accident. She says that at the time she did believe it was an accident because the young girl seemed happy, and she does seem happy. You guys, in photos where this girl is severely burned in her face, she's smiling. And it's something about looking at that image that just breaks my heart, because even though she was being tortured on a daily basis, there was still some part of her that was trying to push through. Now, while all this is going on, Maria is still trying to get assistance from the government. She's looking for government housing, and she's taking Victoria on all these various appointments to try to get some. I'm telling you guys this because she was before social workers time and time again, and despite her appearance, nothing was done. They assumed that Victoria was made to look disheveled on purpose so that they would get more money and so that workers would feel bad for her, when really, if they just looked a little bit deeper, they would realize it was more to it than that. On April 26, 1999, Marie and Victoria visit the homeless persons unit. They're seen by Julie Winter. They complete a housing application form. She sees the passport picture, doesn't really pay attention to it, and then later tells her that her application was ineligible. So we fast forward to June 8th, 1999. Marie gets a job at Northwick Park Hospital. During her first month, no effort was made by Marie or Ealing Social Services to enroll Victoria in educational or daycare activities, which at that point, she shouldn't be in daycare. She should definitely be in school. She's of school age. She leaves Victoria at home alone by herself as she works, with Victoria having nothing to do. I'm talking about no TV, no coloring books, no anything. She was expected to entertain herself without doing anything. After a few weeks of working at the hospital, Marie meets a woman by the name of Priscilla. They talk a little bit, and Priscilla agrees to watch Victoria, who she's told his name is Anna, while Marie is at work. By the middle of June 1999, Victoria was spending majority of her days at the home of Priscilla. While at her home, Priscilla noticed how happy she was. She would smile and dance and play with the other kids, having a good time, at least until it was time to go home. Once it was time to go home, both Priscilla and her daughter noticed that she would go from being this happy, smiley, lively child to being on the edge. And that when Marie arrived, she would speak to her in French. And they couldn't always tell what was being said, but they knew it wasn't good based on the tone and a few words that they could pick out. At some point, Victoria arrives at Priscilla's house, and Priscilla notices a lot of cuts and marks on her hands. So she later asks Marie about it, and Marie tells her that Victoria likes to play with blades. Now, that alone would make me wonder what in the world is going on, because I can't imagine my 7-year-old child wanting to play with razor blades. And let's say it's true. Let's say my child wants to play with blades. I don't think that I would mention that so calmly. I think I would want to look into it and make sure that everything's okay, because why is my child wanting to hurt themselves like this? But we'll keep going. Marie and Victoria are out and about. They run into Esther on the street. This is around June 1999. And the first thing that she notices is a scar on Victoria's cheek. Now, you know, sometimes when something just isn't right, you can feel it, whether you're there to witness it or not. So it's less than 2 months since the last time she saw this girl, and she's noticing that things aren't right. She asked her what happened to her cheek, and Marie says, you know, Victoria fell on an escalator and it bruised her, but Esther isn't believing it because she feels like the story isn't adding up, and that Victoria looks even smaller and even weaker than she did the last time she saw her. She decides to go and visit her. So she goes to Marie and Victoria's home, and she immediately doesn't like what she sees. So what she does is she anonymously calls social services and tells them her concerns. She lets them know that the place where Marie is staying with Victoria isn't clean, that she doesn't believe that the young lady is going to school, that the place where she was staying is small and untidy, and that she didn't look good. The lady that she spoke with says, okay, I'll send a referral. That lady's name was Samantha Hunt, the customer service officer who received the call at the one-stop shop at Brent House, faxes the referral over to the Children's Social Work Department on the same day. A few days later, they're assuming it's around June 21st, 99, Esther calls Brent Social Services again to make sure that the situation is being addressed. She says that she was told by the person on the other end of the phone that they probably had done something about it. Probably does not work in situations like this when it comes to people being abused, especially children being abused, and the vile acts that were being committed against this child. There were so many instances where they could have saved her, but they didn't. So it's weeks later, on July 6th, 1999, when Robert Smith, the group administrative officer, logs the details of the referral onto the computer with questions about Victoria. That's unacceptable. 3 weeks later, where you're just now putting this into the system, crazy. So on June 14th, 1999, Marie meets a bus driver by the name of Carl Manning. He's significantly younger than Marie, and the two of them waste no time getting into a relationship. I'm talking about within a month's time, not only are they in a relationship, but they're living together. So at this same time that all this other stuff is going on, she meets this man, and then she and her daughter move into his 1-bedroom apartment. Now, initially, I thought that things would be better here for her. I was thinking, okay, here's another adult. She'll be protected. She won't be neglected. She won't continue to be abused. She won't be harmed. But I was wrong. Marie and Victoria move into this 1-bedroom with him, and he hates it. The day after They move into this place with Carl. Social services places a letter in the mail. They get it saying that they'll be coming to visit. Now, I don't think you should warn anyone about an upcoming visit. I do not feel like people should have the opportunity to get their act together or to flee. Just show up. So on July 14th, over a month after the original complaint was made, two social workers by the name of Lori Hobbs and Monica Brigman show up at the hostel for this home visit. They're told that Victoria and her mother are gone. Rather than looking further into the situation, the social workers, in my opinion, dropped the ball because they didn't look into things like, oh, let's see where this lady works. Let's see where her boyfriend works. Does she have a boyfriend at all? Maybe if they had looked into these things, maybe they would have been able to save her. So Carl's house, as I said, wasn't any better than a hostel. At least the hostel had a bed for her to sleep in, because here she slept on the sofa and eventually she would sleep in the tub, but we'll get to that. As I said, Carl did not like Victoria. He did not want her at his place. So after a week of living with him, Marie decides to take Victoria to Priscilla's, the lady who watches her from time to time while she's at work. She tells her, look, I just moved in with my man and he doesn't want her around. So if you want to keep her and raise her as your own daughter, then you could do that. Now, Priscilla was a daycare provider, so it wasn't hard for her to take care of kids. But who are you to sit here and try to pawn off a child that's supposed to be yours when she's not and say you can have her? Why not just return her home to her parents that would love her and do the best for her? Maybe they couldn't provide everything, but if they didn't have anything else, they had love. Priscilla tells her, I'll keep her for tonight, but we're going to have to figure something else out. I can't keep her. So Victoria comes in, and Priscilla and her daughter immediately notice that she looks, like she's struggling a little bit. She looks like she's in pain. She has on a hat, and she tells her to take it off. And once that hat comes off, Priscilla and her daughter are horrified. There's a cut on her right eye. It's described as so badly cut that there was a flap of skin that was hanging off of her eyelid. There was a large burn on her right cheek. There was also a burn that looked like it was healing, which must have been the same burn that Esther had saw. And the next morning, and Priscilla's daughter, Avril, decides that they need to go ahead and take this child to the hospital. I personally would have done it the moment that mom left, but that's a different story. So Victoria takes off her clothing while at the hospital to be examined. And when she takes off her clothes, they found even more injuries. She had cigarette burns all over her thighs. She had huge marks across her entire back and legs. It was obvious she had been hit by something and that these injuries couldn't be accidental. The doctors alert Brent Police and Social Services. She's placed under police protection with a 72-hour protection order preventing her from leaving the hospital. Now, that alone would make you think that she was in good hands, because here we are and we finally have something in place. These two adults saw that something was wrong. They took action. They made sure they got her to a place where she can get whatever help that she needed, not only physically, but also mentally. They try asking her what happened, but Victoria is trained and she tells them that she did this to herself. Now, many doctors and nurses are looking at her and they do not believe for one moment that she did this to herself, and they do not believe that these injuries are accidental. After being questioned by Carl, after Carl's being questioned later on by police, he later on admits that some of the injuries that she had at that time did come from him. They don't know this yet, so they talk to Marie, who tells them that all it is that Victoria had a bad case of scabies, and as a result, she scratched herself so much that she's injured herself to this degree. I don't see how you can get those type of injuries from rashes. Cigarette burns don't look like scabies. How do belt marks look like scabies? How did she get to her back and her legs like that, where it looked like slashes were going across them? And even Avril, Priscilla's daughter, said the same thing. Next thing you know, the incompetent Dr. Ruby Schwartz diagnoses Victoria with scabies. Schwartz later admits that she made a big mistake. No sugar honey iced tea. You did. Because that released her. I'm not trying to hear that you made a mistake when other medical professionals are telling you that this looks like abuse. Michelle Hine, a child protection officer at Brent Council, received a report notifying her of Victoria's injuries. She had planned on opening an investigation to the case, but she heard what Dr. Schwartz said, and because she said it was just scabies, she downgraded the level of care and said that, we don't need to look into this any further. In testimony, it was later said that the police officer allowed Victoria's case for the Brent Child Protection Team, Rachel Drewer. She decided to lift the police protection, allowing Victoria to return home. But Rachel didn't follow protocol either. So here you have multiple agencies that are set in place to do a checks and balances of each other, and everyone's dropping the ball. Because under the Children Act of 1989, what Officer Rachel was supposed to do was she was supposed to see Victoria for herself, question her, let her know that she was under police protection, and separate her from her parents. But she did not do this. At the time that she made the decision to close the case and not see things for herself, Rachel was attending a seminar on, ironically enough, child protection. I'm not making this up. So what happens? Victoria gets released back to the hand of the woman that's abusing her. On July 24th, 1999, she's back at the hospital. This time it's for severe burns. Doctors said that Victoria, while at the hospital, would immediately jump to attention when Marie entered the room, that she seemed to be frightened. So frightened that at one point she wet herself. Consultant Mary felt that Victoria was being abused, but she wrote able to discharge on her notes. According to Maureen Ann Meets, another doctor at the hospital, when that was written on the note, she had noted that Victoria was exhibiting signs of neglect, emotional abuse, and physical abuse. If she noted that up there, then why was she released? Later in the inquiry, Mary said that by writing able to discharge, she did not mean that she wanted Victoria to go home, but merely that she was physically fit to leave. How about you write on that paper in all big letters, not to be released to abuser? Because apparently these people aren't reading these reports. So we have yet another social services agency, Enfield, takes up the case, passes it to Haringey. I'm probably saying it right. Wrong. Haringey. Harnegey, I don't know how you would say that. A social worker from that council and a police officer, which Lisa was a social worker, Karen was the officer, were assigned to her case and were scheduled to make home visits on August 4th, 1999. However, it was canceled because they heard about scabies. On August 5th, 1999, there's various discrepancies about who should have this case. Bottom line, the case hit 3 different social services departments, multiple hospitals, and police departments, and none of them saved this child. On the day that she's there with these burns, Marie goes to meet with Lisa and the other officer at the Social Services Department. She explains that Victoria's head was itching so much that she tried to get rid of some of the pain, and as a result, she put her own head under a boiling faucet of hot water. The burns were on the top of her head, coming down across here, onto her face, on her nose. There's no way that she willingly did that to herself because she was itching. I jumped back when I put my hand under too hot of water. And I'm the type of person who my water is so hot that a lot of times I turn pink or red, like I get red from my showers and because of the heat of the shower. So if I'm jumping that from that, I'm imagining that water that feels even hotter on your face and in your head being poured on that poor baby. While being treated for her burns, the doctors didn't see any evidence of her having scabies, but she was released again despite them suspecting something. They passed on their suspicions to the police and social services, but they still released her. So we're back to Lisa, who at this point had been working for the agency for 18 months, and she's given this case. I don't think that she realized the severity of the situation. I know that she tried to reach out at various times. I know that from what I understand, she implemented a 15-point plan that she thought should happen, and she presented it to her supervisors. But they shouldn't have waited on this. They should have jumped on this, and it was dropped yet again. Lisa goes to visit the home, but when she goes there, she never takes time to speak to the child. What abuser is going to come out and openly say, yes, I abuse my child? And why wouldn't Lisa, as the social worker, talk to that child, put her in a setting where she feels safe, and have a discussion with her? Why aren't you speaking to her? Why are you just going off of the word of these parents? Did you look at the file to see what I saw? Because what I saw alone would have maybe been like, no, alarm bells all over the place. So Marie eventually gets tired of social services, and at this point she realizes that she can't keep talking to them, and she can't keep taking Victoria to the doctor because they're questioning things. So now what she decides to do is she decides to take the holy route, and she takes her to various churches and various pastors, telling all of them that she's possessed and she's doing this stuff to herself. I'm not going to go too far into that. I'm just telling you guys how ridiculous this woman was. And this is yet another instance where these people who are supposed to be mandated reporters could have intervened. In August, they apply again for housing. It is denied. In October, social worker Lisa tells them their stuff is denied because Victoria isn't at risk. Boy, was she wrong. She was at risk, but I guess she didn't know of what. 3 days later, in November, Lisa receives a phone call with a hysteric Marie saying that her boyfriend had sexually aid her daughter. They need to hurry up and come over there because they need to get out of that house. They need to move. They need free housing. So Lisa's like, okay, come to the office with your daughter so that we can work this out. Now, you just said your child was in danger. You just said that this man assaulted your child. You come into this office to get help for yourself and your child. Why would you bring the alleged abuser with you? You can't make this up. That's what she did, you guys. She had him with her. She's told all the things that will have to happen in order to do this. So you're willing to have this baby traumatized by being examined and things of that nature. And what will happen if her allegations are found to be false? Now, I don't think that she didn't do the examination because she was worried about the little girl and what would happen to her. I think she was worried about what would happen if they examined her and saw all the damage that they did to her body. So after this, she decides to take back what she said, and they leave. But this isn't good, because now what happens is the abuse gets worse and worse. It gets to the point where Victoria is being abused so much that she has now lost control over her bowels. As a result, when she lays down in the sofa couch to go to sleep, she's defecating on herself. You would think that they would leave this child alone, or that they would take her to the doctor, or they would stop, but they just kept going and going. From October 99 to January 2000, they forced her to get in a trash bag and sleep in the bathtub, in the trash bag, in her excrement. Her hands are tied with masking tape inside of the bag. During a police interview later, Carl said that this was a result of her frequent bedwetting. Well, of course she's frequently wetting the bed. You're assaulting her every single day, all throughout the day. What the hell do you expect? She was starved, and when she was allowed to eat, she had to do so with just her mouth. They would put the bowl in front of her, and they wouldn't even untie her hands for her to eat. On February 25th, social services decides to close her case. But at this point, it's too late. There's absolutely no point in them closing her case, because the day before, on the 24th, Marie takes Victoria to another church, claiming that the young girl is possessed by the devil and she needs an exorcism. The pastor sees Victoria and immediately knows something isn't right. This isn't a demon. She's going in and out of consciousness, and she can't even walk. She can't speak. She's losing focus. She's struggling. He looks at her and says, "This girl is dying. Get her to a hospital." A taxi arrives, takes her to an emergency room. She's taken to the emergency unit of one of the hospitals. She's being treated. And after a couple of hours, they realize that they do not have the equipment needed or the resources to deal with such a severe case. She was dying and they had no idea of the cause. So they take her to another hospital. The doctors didn't know where to begin. They realize that she is suffering from hypothermia. Her body temperature was so low that it took a while for them to register it because they didn't have equipment that could measure it. At some point, it's listed as 27 degrees Celsius. That's equivalent to like 86 degrees. I saw 86 degrees. She was still falling in and out of consciousness. And the reason why she was so hyperthermic is because they had cold winters, and they had this little girl sleeping in the bathroom where there was little to no heat in a trash bag, where she was getting all types of infections and things of that nature from laying in her own excrement. They tried everything to save her, but sadly she passed on February 25th at 3:15 p.m. at the young age of 8. Once examined, they discovered that Victoria was extremely malnourished. She had multiple organ failure, which from what I understand is painful. She had over 128 separate injuries all over her body. These injuries included cigarette burns, tiebacks on her wrists and ankles. It appeared as though she had been hit by several different weapons, but the actual cause of her death was hypothermia. Police then go to question Marie. She's not cooperating at all, denying all the allegations against her. She keeps saying things like, "I just lost my child. I don't need to be interviewed right now." They go to interview Carl, and Carl, on the other hand, wastes no time in telling the truth. At his trial, Carr said that Marie would strike Victoria on a daily basis with a shoe, a coat hanger, and a wooden cooking spoon. She would also strike her on her toes with a hammer. Victoria's blood was later found on Carl's football boots. He admitted at times that he would hit Victoria with a bicycle chain. Chillingly, he'd say, "You could beat her and she wouldn't cry. She could take the beatings and the pain like anything." What type of human says that about a kid? And the sad thing is, she probably didn't cry or whimper out because she was afraid of what would happen should she make too much noise. She would be punished even further. This little girl was tortured. When forensics showed up at his apartment, despite the cleaning attempts that he had made, forensic found traces of blood on the walls, in the bathroom, and even all throughout the home on the furniture. They also found information that allowed them to know that the young lady at the hospital's name was not Anna, It was actually Victoria. So police then realized that This isn't even her child. Now they have to contact the actual parents of this child, let them know that their child is no longer here because of abuse. Victoria's parents are notified. They fly all the way from the Ivory Coast to England to identify their baby's battered body. On November 20th, 2000, at the Old Bailey, the trial into her death is open, where Marie and Kyle are charged with child cruelty and murder. Marie denies all charges. Kyle pleads guilty of cruelty and manslaughter. The judge describes the people in Victoria's case as blindly incompetent. In his diary, Kyle described Victoria as Satan and said no matter how hard he hit her, she didn't cry or show signs that she was hurt. But I think he got it wrong. I think he should have been calling himself Satan. On January 12, 2001, both were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. The judge said to them, "What Victoria endured was truly unimaginable. She died at both of your hands, a lonely, drawn-out death." Marie was transferred to HM Prison Durham and Kyle to HM Prison Wakefield. A lot of the doctors and social workers that I mentioned in this video were terminated, but I don't think that that's enough. Their job is to save lives, and a girl died not just at the hands of those two individuals, but at the hands of all the people who did not follow through the way that they are supposed to. This is a direct statement from the report that I told you about. It's over 427 pages. As I said, it's going to be in the link because it gives a lot of info and insight. Perhaps the most painful of all the distressing events of Victoria's short life is in this country is that even towards the end, she might have been saved. In the last few weeks before she died, a social worker called at her home several times. She got no reply when she knocked at the door and assumed that Victoria and Marie had moved away. It's possible that at that time, Victoria was in fact lying just a few yards away in the prison of the Bath, desperately hoping someone might find her and come to her rescue before her life ended. At no time during the weeks and months of this grueling inquiry did familiarity with the suffering experienced by Victoria diminish the anguish of hearing it or make it easier to endure. It was clear from the evidence heard by the inquiry that Victoria's intelligence and the warmth of her engaging smile shone through despite the ghastly facts of what she experienced during the 11 months that she lived in England. The more my colleagues and I heard about Victoria, the more we know to know her as a lovable child, and our hearts went out to her. However, neither Victoria's intelligence nor her lovable nature could save her. In the end, she died a slow, lonely, abandoned, unheard, and noticed death. Oh, goodness. I wish to pay a warm tribute to Victoria's parents, Frances and Berth. They were present for the whole phase 1 of this inquiry. Their love for Victoria was clear, as were their hopes that she would receive a better education in Europe. In the face of the most disturbing evidence about the treatment of their daughter, they displayed both courage and dignity. Victoria's body was eventually taken back to her village in the Ivory Coast, where her family had a proper burial. And that is the end of this. You guys, this one was hard for me, and I had way more, and I had to take it out because it was just too much. But as I said, I will leave those links at the bottom so that you can see if you want to. No pressure for yourself. I'm not going to put it in the thumbnail. It's too much to see. But if you want to look, it will be in the description box. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think about this case. Until next time.